The morning rush was on. Laptops clicked open. Elevator doors pinged. Conversations overlapped in rapid bursts. Engineers fine-tuning software, designers sketching out the next product launch, and executives hustling to morning meetings with oat milk lattes in hand. At first glance, this tech firm had it all. Sleek open spaces, green certified interiors, diversity posters plastered across glass walls, and inclusion buzzwords tossed into every presentation. Awards for culture and innovation lined the front lobby. People smiled, at least when it counted. But underneath the surface, something didn't sit right. And Harold Bennett had a feeling about it. At 67, Harold wasn't the type to keep quiet about respect. After decades of teaching history in public schools and mentoring young men in underfunded communities, he had earned the right to trust his instincts. He wasn't loud, but he paid attention. He knew what dignity looked like, and more importantly, what it didn't. Harold's son, Jordan, was the CEO of this very company. Young, brilliant, and admired in the tech world, Jordan had built his success on the values his father lived by: humility, excellence, and treating people right. When Jordan spoke at conferences about equality in the workplace, people listened. But Harold wanted to see how those values held up when the cameras weren't rolling. So, when Jordan invited him to stay in the city for a week, Harold made a quiet proposal. "Let me work a shift. No one has to know who I am. I'll mop, I'll sweep, I just want to see." And so he did. Dressed in a faded uniform with a name tag that didn't belong to him, Harold walked into the building, not through the polished lobby doors, but through the back. Past the delivery area, past the break room nobody cleaned, no welcomes, no smiles. Just a nod from a real janitor named Mike and a cart with cleaning supplies. What happened over the next few days would shake Harold's belief in how far things had really come. It started with silence. Then came the stares, then the muttering. But it wasn't until the fourth day that things turned ugly, fast. And when Jordan found out, let's just say a storm was coming. If you're new to this channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from viewers around the world. The first day felt quiet, but not in a peaceful way. As Harold pushed the cleaning cart down the hall of the 5th floor, where most of the design and product teams worked, he noticed something right away. Conversations shifted the moment he entered. Laughter stopped abruptly. Eyes avoided his, not out of shyness. It was different, intentional. He passed a group gathered near the break area, joking and laughing. Someone mentioned a recent trip to Tulum. Another one chimed in about trying out Ethiopian food for the first time. Harold lingered, wiping the nearby counter, curious about the food discussion. But as he approached, the air changed. One of them, a tall guy in thick glasses and a Patagonia vest, glanced over, then leaned in and muttered, "We better watch our stuff. You know how it is." A low chuckle followed. No one challenged it. No one looked ashamed. Harold didn't respond, he just kept wiping. By lunch, he had made his way down to the 2nd floor. No greetings, no eye contact. A few people walked by, earbuds in, but others deliberately stepped around him as if he was in the way. At one point, he tried to hold the elevator for a woman juggling a coffee in her tablet. She looked at him, didn't say thank you, didn't even nod. Just stepped in and stood near the buttons, pretending he wasn't there. He'd been invisible before. But this was something else. Back in the janitor's closet that afternoon, he sat on a plastic chair, took off his gloves, and exhaled. One day in, and he already felt the weight of it. Not just being unseen, but being dismissed. The second day began with orders, not from a supervisor, from an intern. Harold had just finished disinfecting the glass conference table on the 6th floor when a young man, couldn't have been older than 23, pointed at him while on a call. He covered the receiver. "Hey, old guy, you missed a spot under the chairs. Get that." Then he returned to his call like Harold was a part of the furniture. An hour later, two staffers exited a meeting room as Harold approached with his mop. One of them, a woman in heels and a sleek black blazer, laughed and whispered, "Well, at least the floors will be clean. We've got the help on it." She didn't whisper quietly enough. Another employee, a mid-level manager Harold remembered from the company's press photos, passed by, glanced at his face, then at his hands, then rolled her eyes. By the afternoon, Harold was assigned to clean the executive kitchen on the top floor. Odd, since it had been scheduled for Thursday, not Tuesday. But he went anyway. Inside, the sink was filled with used mugs, crumbs were scattered on the counters, and someone had spilled a smoothie on the floor. As Harold started to clean, two employees walked in mid-conversation. One of them said, "I swear, they'll let anyone in this building now. Diversity hires in tech, and now in maintenance. Next thing you know, we'll be reporting to a custodian." Harold didn't flinch. He finished cleaning in silence, but something clenched in his chest. Not anger. Not yet. Disbelief, and more than that, disappointment. He had heard of workplace racism in tech, read the stories, but to stand in it, to feel it whispered across rooms like static, to have it baked into jokes and smirks. It was worse than he imagined. The third day, Harold arrived early, not because he had to, but because he couldn't sleep. He spent most of the morning on the lower levels where the support staff operated. It was quieter there. Fewer passing executives, fewer fake smiles. It was also where he met Ronaldo, a younger janitor probably in his mid-30s, with a worn ball cap and a patient voice. He'd worked at the company for 3 years. Grew up nearby, knew the building inside and out. He didn't talk much, but when he did, there was a kind of fatigue behind his words, a quiet resignation. While they were cleaning the cafeteria together, a new HR associate approached. She looked flustered, holding her phone and pacing. Without so much as a greeting, she gestured at a stack of supplies. "Why are the boxes still here?" she snapped. "We have guests today." Ronaldo began explaining that the supply delivery had been delayed and that he was waiting on instructions before moving anything. But she cut him off. "I don't want excuses. Just do your job, all right?" Then, turning to Harold, she added with a tone meant to be playful, "If you two can keep up, that'd be great. We're not running a charity." Ronaldo stayed silent, no reaction. As she walked away, Harold looked over at him. "You good?" he asked. Ronaldo shrugged. "You learn not to let it get to you. This place is the way it is." Then he turned back to the mop bucket. It wasn't just the words, it was the assumption, the tone, the way people like Harold and Ronaldo could be talked down to, ignored, handled. They weren't seen as people. They were background noise, disposable. Harold finished the day in silence. But that night, he wrote everything down. He wasn't just disappointed now. He was ready, because his son needed to know. And things were about to change. It was Thursday, day 4, and it felt different from the start. Harold arrived just after 6 a.m., an hour before the majority of the staff filtered in. He preferred it that way now. Less noise, fewer eyes. It gave him time to gather himself, to prepare for whatever new way someone might decide to remind him that he didn't belong. He was assigned to the executive wing again, an area where employees were either too self-important to acknowledge him or too uncomfortable to make eye contact. At 9:20 a.m., Harold pushed his cart through the glass doors into the atrium-level workspace just outside the CEO suite. Natural light flooded the hall. Sleek chairs, espresso machines, biometric scanners at every corner. The walls were lined with motivational slogans. Words like empathy, inclusion, and lead with integrity. The irony wasn't lost on him. Harold made his way toward the end of the hallway, mopping near the communal table where 3 staffers stood laughing over their morning lattes. One of them, a senior project manager named Lex, was particularly loud. He was known for his smugness, Ivy League type, wore it like cologne. As Harold worked near the edge of their conversation, Lex looked directly at him, grinned, and said to the others, My grandfather picked cotton. His grandfather probably picked it up after him." A pause. Laughter from one of the others. Lex didn't stop. "No offense, man, just saying, it's full circle, right?" Then, as if to punctuate the moment, Lex accidentally knocked over his paper coffee cup. It spilled across the polished floor, a stream of brown soaking into Harold's freshly mopped tiles. He didn't look down. He didn't apologize. Instead, Lex pointed to the puddle and said, "Oops, can we get that?" Then turned his back. The other two men watched Harold for a moment, waiting for a reaction, but he gave them none. He bent down, pulled a rag from the cart, wiped the floor clean. His face remained calm, but inside, something cracked. Not just frustration, not just rage, something deeper, the kind of pain that doesn't yell. It remembers. It remembered how he'd taught generations of children to stand tall, how he'd raised Jordan to lead with compassion and purpose. It remembered the fights his father had endured just to vote. It remembered the quiet dignity of every man who was expected to swallow humiliation and keep walking. He wasn't angry at the coffee, not even at Lex. He was angry that this was normal here, that this behavior had become woven into the very fabric of the company's culture, and that somewhere in a corner office, his son, the CEO, still believed the organization stood for something better. Harold didn't finish the rest of his shift. He walked straight to the locker room, washed his hands, changed out of the uniform, and packed up in silence. Then, without calling ahead, he went directly to the top floor, the executive suite. The receptionist, used to ignoring him as a cleaner, blinked when she saw him in regular clothes, moving with intention. "I need to see Jordan," he said. His voice was steady, not loud, but absolute. She hesitated. "Sir, do you have an appointment?" "I'm his father." That was all it took. Within moments, Jordan appeared at the doorway to his glass office, confused at first, then surprised, then slightly nervous. "Dad, you okay?" Harold didn't answer right away. He looked around. At the polished floors, the walls decorated with diversity awards, framed headlines about corporate leadership, photos of smiling employees at DEI events. Then he looked directly at his son. "No, I'm not okay." He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. Jordan listened in stunned silence as Harold recounted the week, every comment, every side-eye, every degrading moment. Jordan's jaw tightened. His eyes stayed on the floor for a long time. He didn't speak until Harold finished. "I didn't know," he finally said. "I didn't know it was this bad." Harold looked at him, his son, the CEO, the man the board praised for his progressive vision. "That's the problem," Harold said. "You should have known." Jordan sat down slowly. His entire posture shifted. "You built this company," Harold continued. "You created this brand. You made people believe it was different. But these people, your people, they don't see folks like me as human. They don't see anyone who cleansed their mess as worthy of dignity." Silence. Then Harold leaned in, his voice firm but calm. "This isn't just about me. It's about every person who doesn't fit their mold. Every black man, every brown woman, every quiet cleaner who's been disrespected and pushed aside while everyone pretends to be inclusive." He paused. "And now, you have a choice." Jordan looked up. His eyes were wet but focused. "I hear you," he said. "I won't let it stand." Harold didn't respond with a smile. He didn't soften. He simply stood up, walked to the door, and before leaving said, "This isn't about punishment, Jordan. It's about accountability. You want to lead? Start there." The following Monday morning, every employee, remote and in office, received an urgent email. Subject: mandatory all-hands meeting at 10 a.m. Location: main auditorium, in-person staff Zoom link for remote teams. Message body: attendance is not optional. This conversation is critical. No one knew exactly what it was about. The Slack channels buzzed with speculation. Some thought it was about layoffs. Others guessed a company rebrand. But no one expected what actually happened. By 10:03 a.m., the main floor was filled. Over 700 employees logged in virtually. Some leaned back in their chairs, sipping coffee. Others typed casually as they waited. Then Jordan stepped onto the stage, alone. He wasn't wearing a suit, no teleprompter, no corporate slides, just him, and a silence that took the air out of the room. He paused, looked around the auditorium, looked into the camera lens, and then he began. Last week, a man many of you saw, perhaps passed by, perhaps ignored, walked these halls as part of our janitorial staff. Some of you may remember him, some of you may not, but that man was my father, Harold Bennett. A murmur rippled through the audience. He volunteered to go undercover, not to test or trick anyone, but to understand who we really are when no one's watching. To see if this company, the one I promised would be built on inclusion, respect, and humanity, was living up to that promise. He paused, slowly scanned the room. Some people stared back blankly. Others began to shift in their seats. What he found was not what I had hoped. He took a deep breath. His voice remained calm, but it was heavy. My father was ignored, talked over, mocked. He was assigned degrading tasks, and worst of all, he was humiliated by one of our senior project managers in front of others who chose silence over decency. That manager, Lex, has been terminated, effective immediately. The others who participated or stood by are also being held accountable. Their names don't need to be shared here. They know who they are, and many of you know them too. The room fell still. Even the keyboard clicking on the Zoom feed stopped. To the staff who believe this is just a woke stunt or a PR moment, let me make this clear. This is not a moment. It is a reckoning, and it should have happened long before my father had to step in to remind us what humanity looks like. This company was founded to be different, not just in product, but in culture. But culture isn't in slogans on a wall or smiling photos at DEI events. It's in the everyday choices we make. It's how we treat the people who aren't in boardrooms. It's whether or not we remember the name of the woman who vacuums our offices at midnight. Jordan stepped closer to the edge of the stage. We failed. I failed, because I let myself believe we were better than this without doing enough to ensure it. That changes today. The company's next newsletter didn't include marketing statistics. It listed names. Lex Harper, terminated. 2 project leads, suspended pending investigation. 3 employees, required to attend restorative justice sessions before returning to work. Entire executive team mandated to complete immersive anti-discrimination training. But Jordan didn't stop there. A third-party equity audit was launched, not just a surface-level one, a full-scale, months-long review into hiring practices, performance reviews, promotion pathways, and workplace culture. For the first time, the lowest-paid staff members were invited into leadership feedback circles. Cleaners, security, kitchen staff. Their experiences were documented. Patterns of exclusion and bias that had been swept under the rug for years were finally spoken out loud. Training programs weren't about ticking boxes. They involved real conversations, uncomfortable ones, role reversals, case studies pulled from what Harold experienced, told without sanitization. And yes, it made people squirm, because it had to. In the weeks that followed, something strange began to happen. Employees started talking to the people they'd walked past before. The woman who refilled the coffee stations got thank you notes taped to her cart. A member of the night shift cleaning crew found a warm meal left for him in the break room, with a handwritten note, "We see you, thank you." During town halls, some employees stood up and apologized publicly, not performatively, but from a place of real shame. One engineer said, "I walked by Harold 3 times. Never said a word. I thought I was too busy. Turns out, I was just too comfortable." A black employee from the design team added, "What happened to Mr. Bennett? That's not new to people like me. It's just the first time it's ever been exposed here." People started bringing forward their own stories, subtle ways they'd been ignored, passed over, laughed at behind their backs. The company launched a forum called No More Quiet Pain. It became a space where anyone could share their story anonymously. It filled up within days. And with each post, more people saw just how deeply the rot had spread. 1 month after the incident, Harold was invited back, not as a cleaner, but as a guest speaker. He stood in the same auditorium his son had addressed. He wore the same clothes he'd worn on his first day undercover. He looked out over the crowd and began, "You don't remember me because you didn't want to. I was invisible to you. But I saw all of you." He told them everything, not to shame, but to open their eyes. "I didn't come here to punish you. I came here because my son believed this company stood for something. I wanted to believe that too. But belief without action is just decoration. What matters now is what you do with what you've seen." The story could have ended with the public confrontation, with firings, policies, and company-wide apologies. But real change isn't a moment. It's a movement, and Harold Bennett knew that. Weeks passed, then months, and Harold watched from a distance. He never asked for recognition. He didn't want headlines or handshakes, but he stayed in touch with a few of the janitorial staff, some of whom still called him Mr. B out of affection, and quietly kept an eye on how things were evolving at Jordan's company. And they were. Not overnight, not perfectly, but undeniably. Sitting on the back porch of his modest home in the suburbs, Harold cradled a steaming mug of black coffee in his weathered hands. He looked out at the small garden he'd tended since retirement, but his mind was back in those sterile corporate hallways, the mop in his hands, the way people's eyes passed through him. "I've taught hundreds of students," he said one afternoon in a recorded interview Jordan arranged with a local community college. Some of them were headed for Ivy League schools. Some were just trying to survive, but no matter where they were going, I always said one thing: titles don't make you important. How you treat people does. He paused. And that lesson, apparently, was still needed. When asked about Jordan, Harold's face softened. There was pride in his eyes, not just because his son had built a multi-million-dollar company, but because when it truly mattered, Jordan didn't flinch. He didn't go silent or protective. He stood up. He listened. That's what mattered most to me. A lot of sons would have said, "Come on, Dad, you misunderstood," or tried to clean it up behind closed doors. But Jordan brought it all into the light, and he didn't do it for a show. He did it because it was right. And when asked what he hoped for the future of the company, "I hope they remember that no one's job title is more valuable than another's dignity. I hope they keep the doors open for feedback, and their hearts open too. Because you can train someone to code or market or design. But decency? That's gotta be lived every day." Inside the company walls, you could feel it. The receptionist who used to greet only executives now smiled and nodded at everyone, whether they wore suits or overalls. The custodial team got new uniforms, not because they needed to look more professional, but because someone finally asked them what they needed to do their jobs with comfort and pride. Inclusivity workshops became regular, not just a yearly formality, facilitated by professionals with lived experiences, not corporate jargon. They weren't just about race either. They expanded to include class, gender identity, accessibility, neurodiversity, and age. The HR department launched a new policy: every employee deserves a voice. Under it, anonymous reporting was paired with transparent action. Open forums, once empty, were now standing room only. Employees shared frustrations, asked questions, challenged leaders, and leadership actually listened. One particularly moving moment came during a monthly staff Q&A when one of the custodial workers, Luis, who had been with the company for 6 years, stood up and said, "For the first time, I feel like I don't disappear when I clock in." The break rooms got revamped, not with fancy appliances, but with open seating where everyone, regardless of department, could eat together without invisible lines dividing them. They even started something called Shoes Off Fridays. Not literally about shoes, but about roles. Once a month, people swapped jobs for an hour. Engineers helped sanitize conference rooms. HR sat with IT to field internal tickets. Designers worked reception. No one got it perfect, but they got perspective. And that's what Harold had always wanted. 6 months after the meeting, Jordan released a short company-wide message. No grand speeches, just a written note posted across all internal channels. It read, "Every person who walks through these doors deserves to be seen, not for what they do, but for who they are." My father reminded us of that. Let's not forget it again. In the end, Harold's mission wasn't just about exposing racism or mistreatment. It was about truth, about how the smallest actions, ignoring someone's greeting, sneering at their uniform, handing off a mess without a word, carry the weight of history and bias and unspoken power. Harold Bennett walked into that company invisible. He walked out having sparked a transformation. And it all began with a broom, a badge, and a belief that no one should ever feel small in a place they help keep standing. But it's also about how we all move through this world. Do we acknowledge the person sweeping our floors? Do we greet the delivery driver like they matter? Do we lead with assumptions or respect? Because dignity shouldn't depend on job titles, and kindness shouldn't be reserved for people in power. Let this be a reminder. Character isn't revealed when the cameras are on. It's who you are when nobody's watching. And while policy changes matter, what matters more is how people make each other feel. Because real respect, it's not performative, it's not transactional. It's stopping to acknowledge someone when you don't have to. It's saying thank you when the world teaches you to overlook. It's understanding that dignity isn't optional.